in the scope.
All right, it's in the scope. It's our week 3 fantasy football stashes who will be week 4's main waiver wire targets that are under 25% rostered on ESPN. Most of these players actually under even 1% sometimes. So we are going deep here. Last week, we got you ahead of the game once again. We called out Alec Manor. He was someone who still not rostered, is kind of starting to become a big waiver wire guy. I've given you guys like Kareem Hunt, Bashaw Tootin this season. We've shouted out the likes of Booty. We've shouted out Jawan Johnson. So some really interesting players down the stretch. And we got a new crop of in the scope targets. Eric, who do you have lined up for in the scope week number 3?
Yeah, going a little bit deeper, rostered in less than 6% of leagues on average. That is one of my favorite stashes in those dynasty streets, Isaac TeSlaa, a guy who apparently only catches highlight reel balls when he's out there. Unfortunately, at least for those that are bullish on him, the amount of time that he's been out there is fairly limited. One catch in each of his 2 professional games. But what is interesting is that looking at last week in particular, his participation took a pretty considerable jump up. Right, week number 1, he scored that SportsCenter top 10 touchdown, but that was on 3 snaps. He was out there for 4% of plays. Now in week number 2, all of a sudden he sees 17 snaps. And he's out there for 29% of plays. And specifically, what is interesting is that we're seeing a precipitous drop off in the snap share of one Khalif Raymond. So this very much so could be kind of the last week where TeSlaa is a rotational player and instead starts to emerge as the starting wide receiver 3 or the primary outside or flanker option. And so you can go out there and get him now for a $0 bid. You might be able to scoop him up first come, first serve tomorrow morning and be pretty happy that you do so, although he is very much so a speculative stash and hold type of ad.
Yeah, that's kind of the thing with Isaac TeSlaa is he's a very talented rookie, I would say. At least the Lions believe so, that they're willing to shell out a ton of draft capital to go up and get him in this 2025 NFL draft. So I do like the prospect. I think the big thing is like you need the Lions offense to continue to be elite, which we saw in week 2. We didn't see so much in week 1. That might be a byproduct of this Green Bay Packers defense, boys, just being absolutely awesome. So somehow holding it down in the secondary with not great options there. But still, nonetheless, TeSlaa is going to have to, find a way to carve out a role with Jama, with ARSB, continue to kind of do their thing. So he kind of almost feels like almost like the David Montgomery of the receivers here, where you need a high value, high efficiency from the Lions to be successful. But if an injury were to happen to Amon-Ra or Jamo as well, I mean, people are dumping 100% fab on someone like TeSlaa. So it might not be a bad idea to get a hold of it. For my in the scope target that I'm going to run out in this episode, give me a little Jeremy McNichols of the Washington Commanders, added in just 0.1% of ESPN leagues. Yes, McNichols returns, baby. So I love the nickname, and he's not an exciting player. I don't think he's anything really talent-wise more than a Jag. He might be someone who is shoehorned into this Austin Ekeler role that garnered 47% of snaps in week 1, 52% of snaps in week number 2 as well. And if the Commanders aren't ready to trust JCM in pass protection, in which his usage there on Thursday night kind of alludes to that, I think Jeremy McNichols has a role here. In the 3 games, he saw 7+ touches last year, 11.7 fantasy points per game, finishes of RB8, RB28, and RB48. So, always finishing as either a 1, 3, or a 4. So not burning you by any means. I think Jeremy McNichols has a little juice here. So I'm willing to throw it out in the wind and put a little 0 fab bid this week on Jeremy McNichols, just to see if I can get him back on the squad. And either him or Chris Rodriguez are going to be the guy. And I'm playing my flag that McNichols could become someone who's just at least worth a roster spot. If you need a bye week fill-in the RB2 slot, he could do that. So Steve, throwing it over to you now for your favorite in the scope target for week number 3 of the season.
Yeah, you know me. I love a good bomber, right? So I love my deep threats, and that's Alec Pierce down there in Indianapolis. he played a good amount of snaps. I think he played like 64 of 71 snaps or something like that. So he's getting he's on the field. The problem is the Colts see him as a one-trick pony, and that is he's really fast and he's really big and he's good at catching long passes. But I feel like there's more in there, and I feel like we saw week 1, he was kind of non-existent. Week 2, suddenly got a bit more involved. His usage went up, his participation went up, and I'm like, wait a minute now. And this was against the Denver defense, so this isn't like he was playing against scrubs. This was the best defense in the league, according to some people. I think Alec Pierce might be onto something. I know he'll never be a star, but that's all we're telling you to add, right? Like if I wanted you to add a star, I'd go tell you to, do something else. But these guys that are under, 25% added, he's at 6%. He's at 1% on ESPN leagues. I mean, this is a guy who's very under the radar. You could get him for $0. I don't think he's going to set the world on fire, but he's a guy you could put in your flex and have a reasonable hope that a deep ball will land in his hands at some point. And usually it's for a touchdown.
Yeah, it's just not the way I like to target my receivers is the issue. It's like I like the production that he puts out there, and he's, the wind sprint king, right? 90% of snaps last week. So the usage did go up. You're 100% on brand there, Steve. I just worry that, what happens when he misses one of those deep threats and he doesn't catch 4 of 5 targets like last week for 68 yards. And it's closer to that week 1 performance where it's 1 for 36 or, even a little bit less. And, we're also putting faith that Daniel Jones remains playing as good as he has right now, which I just don't know if that's the case. But nonetheless, Alec Pierce is a guy that if you needed help at wide receiver, especially this week against Tennessee, I think you could do a lot worse. And if he goes out and balls out in Tennessee, we've seen this song and dance before with him. He's a guy who it seems like every last 2 or 3 years gets attention on the waiver wire, and he might garner some next week if he does have a big week in the Music City. So
I think the great thing about Alec Pierce is that even if Daniel Jones doesn't keep up the production, it doesn't matter. He's the perfect wide receiver that it doesn't matter for because he only catches a few passes anyway. So he needs one, right? He's not Michael Pittman where he needs 6, 7, 8, 9 passes to land in his hands to have a really productive week. That's not his role. It's one pass. He needs one pass to land in his hands, and he could give you a real good week.
Yeah, I think, it depends what you like. Some people do like those, bombers that catch one ball and, hey, I went from 0 points to 10 in a hurry. I prefer, kind of the slow, sluggish, hey, let me get, six receptions. If they're 30 yards, it's 9 points. It is what it is. But hey, to each their own here. Steve's got a high flyer here in Alec Pierce off of the waiver wire that you can grab for absolutely nothing.